truth is finally here. Alrighty guys, now, typical large dent. I have no idea how this was formed. I just picked it up at the body shop and it was like that. Had a little bit of damage there too, but they threw the door away for that. It's a real shame too, because that could have been fixed very easily, but that's just the way it is in body shops anymore, R&I. Okay, so the worst thing that you could do, guys, in something like this, most people, they'll get in back of the panel, just kind of pop everything out, or they push it out, they force it out. And like we said when we were doing body lines, the worst possible thing you could do, because those crowns there, that we got them highlighted in red, those crowns here, here, and there, hold a lot of energy. We talked about the crowns basically being storage batteries for energy. Okay, they hold most of the energy in that dent. It looks like it was, whatever hit it right around here, maybe just below the body line. And people think, well, you know what? I need to hit it on the impact point and move it. No, you don't. The energy that's stored in each one of these crowns has got to come out first, and it has to come out as efficiently and as cleanly as we can. Okay. Now, one basic thing we have to know about sheet metal, guys, before this panel was ever damaged, okay, in fact, before it was even made at the factory, at the foundry, when this sheet metal was rolled, and have you guys, I'm assuming you've seen those movies where they have the big, huge presses that this red hot metal goes through and they roll it and do a bunch of things and it comes out as sheet metal. Okay, at that stage, long before it ever got to be on this door at the factory, that panel was made to be in tension this way and a little bit of compression that way. And that's very, very important, guys. A lot of people think that the body line or the braces are what gives a panel its rigidity and makes it be nice and flat. At the foundry, when they put tension into the panel and compression, if they didn't do that at the foundry, if they just rolled it what we call just a neutral grain, to where there was no tension or compression at all, if you put a panel like that or a piece of metal on like that, and you look down the door, it'd be a wavy mess. That way, what happened when we hit this thing, or whatever hit this, what happened? When it got hit, guys, what happened? Instead of this panel being in tension this way, it's now in a slight state of compression. And what was supposed to be in a little bit of compression this way, the crowns blew everything out into tension. So we reversed the forces that this panel wanted to have on it. Okay? And a lot of what we're going to be talking about is doing things real fast and efficiently with as few movements as possible. We're going to be putting this panel, when we can, back into tension and compression as fast as we can. That's where we're going to make our money. Okay, so back to talking about crowns. This crown here, that's roughly about a 90-degree angle. This one here, about a 110, and that one there is just very, very slight. Guys, here's the thing. Let's say that this wasn't hit nearly as hard, okay? In fact, let's say my stomach here was the panel, okay? And an object hit the panel, and it hit it just a little bit, not very hard at all. What would happen is the object would hit, a crown would start to form, okay? But since it didn't get hit very hard, the crown would start to form, it'd bounce back out, the dent would bounce back out, and all you would have is just a little impression of where you made your impact point, and maybe a slight little horizontal high area below and above it. You're going to see these all the times on the lots. You think, well, what caused that? That's exactly what happened. It didn't get hit hard enough for the dent to stay and for the crown to stay. It just wasn't hit hard enough, so everything bounces back out. The crown never formed. It started to, but just wasn't hit hard enough. So you have a soft low, two minor little highs like that. You just knock down those highs, pick up the low with a soft tip tool, you're done. Take you just a couple of minutes to do those. So that's what happens when a dent wasn't hit hard enough to make a crown take what we call a permanent set. Okay? And like we said before, these really, you're not supposed to call these crowns. These are actually called rolled buckles. That is the proper name for it. But they've been calling crowns forever now, and we have just kind of have to bow to ignorance here. That's what everybody calls them now, so we have to kind of do the same thing. So here's what happens if we hit just a little bit harder than that, guys. Let's say I get hit just a little bit harder. Crown starts to form, and now since I hit a little bit harder, the crown gets past what we call the breakover point. And that's an important thing to know. Breakover point is the point at which the crown now takes a permanent set and the dent stays in the panel. You okay so far? Okay. So generally, guys, the breakover point, usually, not always, depends on the panel. Breakover point is right around the 160, maybe 150 degree mark. So that would be 180, no crown at all. That would be 170, a very slight crown. 160, a little bit more of a crown. Right in there, that angle there is generally your breakover point, right around 160 or so. Anything more than 160, between 160 and 150, now instead of bouncing back, the crown stays. And so does the dent. Okay. Now, some people will say, well, you know what? A lot of dents, especially when they're not all that big or something, you can just pop those out and back. I mean, they have a crown, but they just pop out real easy. Why don't I just do that? Well, you can. We call those poppers. And those generally, how you tell is you push underneath the crown, and if it comes out with just a little bit of hand pressure, a moderate amount of hand pressure, that's fine. You didn't mess anything up. But the thing is, guys, poppers, you'll never see them really over about a 130 degree crown. And that would be kind of extreme. Usually like the 150, 140, those are poppers. Like something like that, there's no way that that's gonna pop. You're gonna have to force that out, okay? And like we said, the problem is if you force that out, all that energy that was locked up in those crowns, that's very easy to get out. If I force that up, that energy that's locked up goes through the entire panel now. And I'll push over here in a low form there. I'll get that one out in a horizontal low form there. I'll get that one out, another low, and you just end up chasing your tail around and around and around because you permanently basically screwed up this panel. That energy would have been very easy. The energy in those crowns would have been very easy to get out had we done it right away, but we didn't. Okay, so almost all the time, guys, we have to address the crowns. Okay. And here's the thing, guys. A lot of people say, well, how do I know I want to get involved in that dent? We're going to talk about kind of the sweet spot in large dent repair. And the first thing when I'm estimating a dent, I always look at crown angle. To me, that's just about the most important thing. Why? That crown angle is going to determine how much energy gets locked up in that panel and is going to tell me how fast I'm going to be able to get this thing to 95 to 98%. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We talked about if it doesn't get past about 160, the crown, it bounces out from 160 to 140. Well, let's go 150. Okay, let's say it crowns at 150, crowns there permanently now, so is the dent. That dent is probably going to take you no more than 10 minutes to do. Okay, just knock the crown out. We'll show you how to do that very quickly. Bring your dent out and you're done. Now to go from 150 to 130, just another 20 degree crown angle. Not a whole lot of difference, right? 150 to 130. Basically, guys, for every extra 20 degrees of crown angle you get, double the amount of energy locked up in the panel. So from 150 to 130, twice as much energy locked up. From 130 to 110, twice as much energy locked up. From 110 to 90, twice as much as from 110. So we double the amount of energy for every 20 degrees of crown angle in the panel. That's pretty much a hard and fast rule. Not 100% of the time, but pretty close. So I'm going to recommend that you guys do, at least for the first year, to stick at crowns that are 90 degrees or less. So 90 degrees to 150. 90, that's what you're going to be sticking with, okay? That's your sweet spot. That crown angle is going to let you get to 95 to 98% repair very quickly, make your maximum amount of money with the least amount of knowledge. And techniques that you have to use. If you go over a 90 degree crown angle, totally changes everything. We got to change everything up quite a bit, at least if we're going to do it fast and still get to 98% repair. Okay, so every 20 degree extra crown angle, we double the amount of energy locked up on the panel. Now, we're going to pretend this panel didn't have that body line. We're going to talk about body lines just in a minute, but for right now, we're going to pretend this is your basic, nice, rounded panel, no body line, and you have just a typical crown there, one little over there, just a nice, typical dent, okay? What we have to do, guys, since most of our energy is locked up in these crowns, and of course, that's right now we're assuming, since there's no stretched metal in this, I don't know what hit this, but it was fairly soft. If it's stretched metal, that's another thing we have to watch out for. In fact, when you have stretched metal, guys, your limiting factor there, in my opinion, at least for the first year, stay at about no more than a quarter sized worth of stretched metal. Okay, and you think, well, a quarter, that's not very big. Well, stretched metal, that is, guys. I mean, like how hard this thing was hit, there is no stretched metal in this whatsoever. None. Okay, but if I had taken a ball peen hammer and bing, hit it like that, I'd have put maybe a little pencil eraser size stretch metal. Now we got to remember, stretch metal is thinned metal only, okay? A quarter size worth of stretch metal is quite a bit. And basically what you're gonna have to do, unless you have that cold shrinking disc we talked about, is getting back there with a sharp tool and just gather metal. And it's kind of a matter of how patient are you. Again, there's a sweet spot here. If we go over that quarter size amount of stretch metal, it's going to take you quite a bit more time. Plus, that's probably going to be the weak spot in the dent that people are going to look at and go, oh, it looks good, except for that one little spot right there. And remember, we said that's our limiting factor in PDR. We can only handle so much stretched metal. We can only cold shrink so much. After that, body shop's got to take over. If they even know what to do at a body shop anymore. Yeah, I know they don't anymore, but... Quarter size stretch metal, and actually dime size is what you guys should be starting at, no more than the dime size, okay? And you say, well, how do I know I have dime size stretch metal? Well, size to depth ratio is one of the big ones. If a high speed, golf ball hits at high speed, it'd make a nice round dent, but you look at it, that's gonna be way too much depth sometimes, at least if it was really high speed. Pellet guns, the plastic pellet guns, a lot of those especially the high pressure ones. Now, if it's a metal pellet gun, you've got an unrepairable dent. That's going to be too much stretched metal in too tiny of an area, okay? But basically, if it's got a very deep dent, a very sharp slope, that's a really good indication you've got some stretched metal there. Not just on the bottom, but on the sides as well. Okay. Another indication of stretched metal, scratched paint. Okay, if the paint's missing or it looks like it's gouged, that's another indication. And usually gouge will be from a crease or something. Now, if your metal is actually gouged, if you look at the metal and you go, wow, the metal's actually gouged, that's going to be a lot of stretched metal. Any more than about a 1-inch gouge in metal, even if you can brush touch it, I wouldn't do it. I mean, you can, but it's going to be the weak spot in your dent that we talked about. As far as paint gouge, about a 3-inch paint gouge, you're probably right at you could easily be at your quarter size limit there. Okay. Now also, guys, size of the dent doesn't matter as much as crown angle does. Okay, so let's say we had golf ball size dent, bigger than a golf ball actually, high speed golf ball hit very, very hard, and right above it had like a 60-degree crown on it. Nice heavy crown. That's going to be much harder to do than that one, guys, as far as time, because you're going to have a lot more stretched metal in there, and that 60-degree crown, that is not going to come out with conventional, well, it can come out with conventional PDR, but it's going to take quite a while to do. You're going to be able to do this much faster than a dent that big with a, so crown angle, guys, is extremely important, okay? One that you guys will have to worry about, though, is the flatness of the panel. If you have an extremely flat panel in both axes, this way and that way, very, very flat panel, and you've got some appreciable amount of stretch metal in there, walk away from it.
So it's almost better because a customer will look at that dent compared to that little golf ball one and think that this one's worse. So you can actually, you can charge more.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying you couldn't get something like that to look 98% if you have the time. See, that's the whole thing. How much time do you there's a sweet spot. If you're going to make $300 an hour in this, you got to know where your sweet spot is. Now, if it's a high dollar car and the guy, just cannot have anything but his factory paint on it, he may pay you a small fortune for that. Another limitation on large dent repair, where it's located, usually fenders are going to give you a little bit more of an issue, because on doors, quarter panels, on a dent like this is going to come out very quickly and easily. On fenders, you have that, line, you have the curve there, followed by a line on top of it, followed usually by a concave, convex body line, another convex, convex, then a flat area on top. A lot of panel transitions there. You're not going to get anything for free there. On this dent here, if you do it correctly, you should only have to work about 20% of that total area max. Here, there, a little bit in there. The rest of the should all come out for free. These are gravy dents here. On a fender, something like this, you're going to end up working the entire that entire area. So you're not going to get anything for free on most fenders. So guys, if we're going to put so much, if that crown affects so much of our dent, it's going to affect the finish big time. It affects everything big time. What we basically have to do, guys, is find very fast, very efficient ways of taking that energy out of that crown. I mean, that is all important, fellas. If there's one thing that I say was the key to large dent repair, you have got to know, you've got to manage your crowns. You have to. You have to remove these things as fast and efficiently as possible. Okay? Now, what is the fastest way to remove any crown? Almost any crown. The fastest way, remember we talked about tension? That's it. Let me show you. Now, this is an example of a complex dent that could not be done without a tension pull. It's a pre-smog Suburban in great condition, so it's worth quite a bit, and a replacement door was not available. Paint was blowing off at the impact points, so there was some stretched metal here. The entire length of the door was shortened by about 3/4 of an inch. Fortunately, this vehicle did not have an intrusion beam. If it had, the beam would have been bent, making a paintless dent repair impossible. Notice the severe rolled buckle or crown at the bottom. The tension pull enabled me to get the crown worked completely out without removing the bottom molding. This picture shows the setup for the tension pull with a homemade metal glue pulling plate using high-strength PDR glue to hold the plate to the panel. The large double plate was needed to enable me to put the necessary high amount of tension on the damaged area during the repair. The homemade pulling device was used with a high-strength ratcheting tie-down strap to provide the tension. This is the repair done to better than a 95% level in about an hour. Again, this repair would have been impossible to do to this level using PDR without using tension. Fastest way to remove crowns and get a fast, quick, clean repair, tension, when you can use it. In the real world, you'll find you can use tension probably not quite 50% of the time. If you're lucky, maybe about 50% of the time if you're creative. Now, you say, well, why does tension work so well? Well, guys, tension, and we're talking about putting tension that way with hot glue, okay? Tension is going to put this panel back into that tension and compressive state that we talked about very quickly, and is going to move those crowns in just a matter of seconds if it's done correctly, okay? And remember what we talked about when you're putting tension on, you grind, you get one of these hurricane straps, ground off there can't be any galvanized coating on this at all. Glue will not stick to it. You heat this tab up, about 140, 150, heat your panel up too. You'll need at least one full glue gun for this. Stick it in, and the big thing is, guys, where do you stick this? A lot of people say, well, you want to stick it in the impact point. No. Some people say, at the top of the crown. No. Where you want to put your tab is where you estimate your breakover point is going to be. Okay, what do we mean by that? If it got hit right there, your breakover point would have been right about there, and if that had been the impact point, your crown down there, your breakover point would be right about there. Would have been 150, just starting to form. So those are our two breakover points in this dent. We'd want to put one tab there and one tab there, and then pull. With the motorcycle tie-down strap like we talked about, that's what you would do. Put your tension there, you pull, and as you, actually this would be the ideal tab to use on that'll just about get both breakover points. But now, right now your door handle would be in the way. So obviously we would have to work around that a little bit. We'd have to put one up slightly there and maybe one down about here. But as we're pulling that, you'll watch your crowns start coming right out, wash right back into the dent. Now, the important thing about tension, fellas, say, well, you're watching your dent, right? No, I could care less what's happening to that dent. I'm 100% focused on my crowns, 100%. If I'm putting tension on and those crowns are coming down, I'm absolutely happy. As soon as they, and sometimes they'll come all the way down, all the way in, dent pops out, you're almost done. But usually what will happen is the crowns will start coming down, and then you'll feel it when you're putting tension on it. They resist you a little bit. The crown almost does one of these things. It stops, doesn't want to move anymore. Now, can you force it? You can force it out. You don't want to do that though, guys. Remember we talked about metal moves like water? When that crown stops, you stop and you start tapping that crown down. And obviously, like we talked about before, if you tap that crown down without doing anything, it's just going to laugh at you. It's not like that body line one we did, where you can wash it right into the body line, most of your dent comes out just with washing your crown. That ain't happening here. We have to help it. So when we can use tension, guys, put right at your breakover points of the dent. And again, breakover point, if we got hit here, your breakover points start to form and it gets deeper and deeper. The more energy was hit, the more the crown's going to travel from the dent and it's going to make a tighter angle there. Why will you estimate your breakover points would have been? You don't have to be exact about it, but just roughly, that's where you want to do your tension pulls. Okay, so if you're putting tension on, your crown stops moving, you stop moving, tap it down. And what you'll notice with tension, when you tap down, those crowns respond pretty doggone fast, especially with a hammer. They just come down. They'll almost jump on you. When you've done enough crown work, go back to your tension and then move nice and free. You usually have to do that about 2 or 3 times as you're pulling. Sometimes not at all. It just all depends. You pull it, the crowns wash back into the dent, top and bottom wash into the dent. Dent pops out, boom.
Do you release the tension when you're tapping down, or do you just leave the tension on and tap down?
Always leave tension on. I leave tension on my repair to at least about the 95% level. So with the tension, all the stuff that we're going to be talking about here in a minute is going to be done with tension on the panel when you can do it. Like we said, it's not always practical to put tension on a panel. So what would you do if you were on a fender, guys, and you had to put tension on a fender? Well, you're going to rip the fender off the car, right? I mean, there's ways of doing it. You can, and on a door, sometimes it just isn't practical. If that dent were all the way over there where the fender is, I got a fender in the way. How am I, and if I put tension all the way back here, it's not going to make a lot of good. Now, if I took the entire door off the panel and put tension on both sides of the door, hey, no problem there. But again, how long is that going to take? Plus, you got R&I, the electrical. Odds are, you're going to mess up with the computer. You got to take it to the dealership, and then it just becomes a matter of, no, we're not going to be able to use tension on this. We'll have to find, and then there are other ways to release it. We're going to talk about in just a minute. But whenever you can, guys, tension works. Tension's the bomb. It does everything very fast, very efficiently, and it gets you to that 98% level very fast, very, very fast. Okay. So we okay on that so far? Roughly, we'll go into this in a little more detail. Okay, so. Put our tension on. As long as the crowns move, we keep putting tension. When they stop, we tap down. Now, let's say we put tension on and everything is popped out. Okay, we keep the tension on the panel, and now we're going to start taking pressure taps out, which we're going to talk about just in a little bit. Okay, so we have our tension on, everything pops out. Now, there's one more mega force that we have to talk about, guys, and we said the tension and compression on the panel, that is a huge mega force in any panel. We have to put the panel back into tension, and putting tension on the panel, obviously, is going to put it back into tension very quickly, okay? But there is one more thing. If the legs of your crown, these are the legs of your crown, that's the top of your crown, these are the legs right there. If the legs of your crown go past the top of your door panel, for instance, so in other words, let's say that our legs, instead of ending there, went here and there, and there was no top. The top would have been up here, but obviously we have no metal up there. That's one of the surest indicators of you're going to have to re-arc. We call it re-arcing a panel. You say, well, what does that mean? Well, if we get hit really hard, the crowns blow right up past the top. What happens is, guys, this entire panel flattened out. And if you watch a lot of the videos out there, there's 3 videos I'm thinking about especially, you can actually watch in a reflection that where the guy's picking up the dent, and you can see the entire panel. And I think it's overhead fluorescence he's got there doing one of these things right at the top. It's like the thing needs to be re-arced, and he did the entire repair without re-arcing the panel. It'll scream for when it needs it. It'll just say, hey, you know, you gotta, why didn't that come out as well as it should have? And how come I have to pick up so hard? I've got everything done right. What's going on? More than likely, you got a recrown. Now, if you don't have to recrown it, don't, okay? And then we're gonna talk about how to know that here. First of all, legs of the crown. Second thing that I'll do, if I'm picking up and I think that needs to be re-arced, I'll do this. And when you do have to re-arc a panel, here's what I do. These are very expensive tools. You have to get a 2x4 and cut a kerf in there with your saw. It's gonna cost you at least 50 cents for that. And you got to make another one. The one I use on top, I have different curves cut in it. You take your bottom one, put it underneath your car, right where your bottom lip is, and you put a jack underneath it, and you put just enough pressure on the jack to put it very firmly into the panel. You should just start to see the door lift up a little bit. You don't want to be crushing anything. Just put a good amount of pressure on the bottom there, picking it up, okay? And then we put this kerf here. Now this is if you have the window still in the door, you'll have to go on the edge there because the window will be in the way. You put that there, and then you just take your hammer, give it a good pop, and you'll actually be able to see the car go, the panel go like this, and a lot of your loads will be gone instantly. Okay, so that's how we re-arc a panel.
Does the wood have to be directly on top of each other?
It needs to be, yeah. Well, unless the crown's like that, sometimes that's an indication that it may not be, but usually, yeah, right underneath the crown. So you put this block of wood here with that kerf underneath the bottom of the door, put a jack underneath here and jack up on this to where it's just starting to lift the door up a little bit. Then you stop, put the top block there. And so what you're doing is hitting both top and bottom at the same time, in a sense, and you're re-arcing your panel. We put tension on, everything comes out. We leave tension on. We get our pressure traps out in the right sequence, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and you're ready to sell the vehicle. Because there was no, I mean, I still think that was a boot print. I don't know, that maybe not. A little bit of work on that body line, you'll be done very, very fast with this, and you're going to get 70 to 80% of this thing for free. After you've got your crowns knocked down, that you're good to go with tension, super, super fast. Now, what happens when you can't use tension? And that's going to happen all the time. Well, we still got to find a fast, efficient way of getting these crowns knocked down, but tension just isn't practical. So what do? Okay, so we determined that we can't use tension for whatever reason. Remember we talked about the Crown Director tab? Yeah, that's what we're going to use here, guys. And there's just a little bit of theory behind these. Basically, the tighter your crown, the closer it has to be to the apex of the crown. Okay? Now, if that were only, say, like a 120-degree crown, nice and soft, we could probably put that tab all the way down there. A tight one like that, we're going to have to put it right underneath the apex of that crown to get any kind of action going on it. And what we're doing, guys, with this is we're not trying to move any metal. We're just trying to direct the crown back into the dent. Okay? Tapping on it, like we said, will do you no good whatsoever. It'll sit there and laugh at you. It will not move, guaranteed. Since that crown angle is quite a bit stiffer than that one, that's more like a 120-degree crown there. That's pretty close to a 90 right there. I'm going to pay most of my attention here because that's obviously where I have most of my pressure locked up. Crown angle will always tell you that. Get my tab underneath there, and what I'm doing is I'm putting just enough pressure to start that crown moving down. Now, if I start pulling, and we just use your receiver, okay, stick it in there with a motorcycle tie-down strap like we talked about. Find something, heavy to pull off of. You start pulling. And what'll happen is, by the way, guys, I'm not saying that you always have to use a motorcycle tie-down strap on these. A lot of times hand pulling will be enough, especially if it would like, say, 120-degree crown, hand pulling would be fine. 90 degrees, it really is nice to have your hands free. It really is. I mean, it's just so much faster. And what I'm looking for, guys, is two things. Obviously, I want my crown to move, of course. If it doesn't move and I'm not pulling any metal out from underneath my tab, I probably need to go a little bit closer to the apex. If I'm right on the apex and it isn't moving, I put the maximum amount of pressure I can and just start tapping down and it will start moving. Okay. Now, one other thing I'm looking for, guys, if I start pulling on this tab and I start pulling metal underneath it, stop immediately and reposition your tab. That means you didn't get close enough to the apex. Okay. If I'm as close as I can get to the apex of the crown, but I'm still pulling up metal underneath it, then I need to stop and get that crown. You do not want to pull metal with this, guys. You want to move the crown. This is only to direct the crown, nothing more. If you pull a big snot of metal out with this thing, you're going to block that crown from moving down.
So what would stop you from just going immediately right to the apex of the crown?
Time. If it's just a shallow crown, there's no need to. I can go all the way down there and I don't have to reposition my tab so often. But if I have to go right down here, that crown moves 10 degrees, I already got to reposition my tab. And you're lazy, you know, and you'll get the hang of it very quickly where to do it. Okay? Now you say, well, how do I know when I can start pulling my bottom crown? Basically, when that crown angle matches that crown angle, I pull them both simultaneously. And on something like this, I don't think that's going to be, I think that's probably going to move on its own. We'll find out, but if not, we'll help it. So, when that crown angle starts moving into the dent, what do you think is going to happen when we get to the breakover point? So remember we talked about impact point there, breakover point was right about there. Remember, crown, breakover point, that's where it takes a permanent set. Now if it gets hit harder, it's going to make a deeper crown. And the more harder you hit, the tighter the angle, the further it'll be from the impact. Okay, so as we reach our breakover point, as we're taking our crown down with our tab, what do you think is going to happen when we reach the breakover point? The whole dent's going to pop right out. Yeah, it should. Now, on something like this, it will. Yeah, it'll pop right out, and hopefully you matched your stuff there. You popped everything out, and at that point, guys, if you've done everything correctly, worked your crown down, the thing is, you say, well, it took me longer to do this, and the guy just kind of moved his metal right from the start. Well, it's true, it did take you a little bit longer, but you look at your work now compared to his, whatever he got when he pushed it out, he's going to have to work for every small percentage he gets. He's getting nothing for free probably, okay? He's going to be working this thing all day long, and actually probably will never, the best he'll do is get a 90% repair, probably only an 85%, because that energy now went through a huge part of the panel and he is totally screwed. Okay, you got at least another 10% of your dent out, plus you're going to get to 95%. He never will. And you're going to get there fairly fast too. Okay, so that's the difference. We wash the energy, wash the crowns back into the dent, everything comes out, we're good to go. Now, did we get as much metal as we did when we put tension on? No. Tension will always get you to the finish point much faster. It'll get your dent to pop faster. It'll make your crowns release better. It'll give you much more free metal. If you have to re-arc the panel and you have tension on it, you can kiss it to re-arc it. If you don't have tension, you're gonna have to hit it harder. So everything works better with tension when you can do it. Okay, but again, we can't always do it. It's not always cost effective. Let's say we've done everything correctly. Panel pops, good to go. We think, well, I'm going to put my board up there and start picking up my lows. No, you don't. Guys, even if you put tension on the panel, did everything correctly, dent pops out, you are still going to have residual pressure locked up in this panel. And guys, here is where everybody blows it. Everybody. They just, well, I just want to pick up my lows. No. What do we say pressure traps were when they're in a panel? They're springs, they're energy traps. You start picking up those lows, if you left any residual pressure locked up in that panel, it's just going to sit there and fight you through the entire repair. Okay? So when this thing pops out, you think you're good to go? Not yet. Now, what is residual pressure? What do we mean by that? Well, first of all, if we put tension on, there's much less residual pressure, okay? But let's say either if you could or you couldn't, you're still going to have some. You're just going to have much less with tension, okay? Let's say you couldn't use tension, everything pops out. What do I do about this residual pressure? Well, there's lots of different types, but there's three main ones that we basically are concerning ourselves with. There's horizontal pressure traps, ones that run at about 45 degrees to the dent, and then vertical pressure traps. And here's the thing, guys, and this is really important. You have to remove them in the right sequence, okay? Any old school metal guy is going to tell you, you know, it's all about sequencing. If you do it even if you do the right stuff, if you do it out of sequence, you're screwing yourself. You're costing yourself huge amounts of money. Okay, so we have to release our pressure traps in the right sequence. Write that down. And we're going to go over that sequence right now. Horizontals, guys, are by far the most important and the ones we have to get out first. And what does a horizontal pressure trap look like? That's the thing. They're usually very, very soft, mild humps. You really can't see them unless you're looking close. And sometimes you can almost can't even feel them. They're very slight. Now, sometimes you can. They'll be very clear and you go, yeah, that, especially if you can't use tension, they're going to be more pronounced. You'll see soft little horizontal line running, and they love hiding right where your crown used to be. So if that was where your crown was before everything popped out, do a real close look right in this area. Guaranteed you're almost always going to see something. And of course you can expect to see them down here too, and maybe some over there where that crown was also. So you want to look especially where the tops of your crowns were before you started pulling for these horizontal pressure traps. That's where they love to hide. And we'll tell you how to spot them here in just a second. Now, the problem, guys, with horizontal pressure traps, we said they are the most important to get out, but they're also the toughest to see. Why is that? Remember we talked about when a panel curves this way and you put a board horizontal to it, your reflection board, what happens? Your fog gets eaten up. So, and if you're using a pinstripe, that gets eaten up too. If you had like an Audi TT door, a Mazda Miata highly curved door, you put your pinstripe or your fog board up there, it's like, man, that thing just pinches up onto almost nothing. So the ones that are most important for you to get out are also the toughest to see. So what do we do? Well, what I generally do, you can use a fog if you could get the fog board far enough down, but the floor is right there. You know, what are you going to do? Remember your yellow board? This is your outside board. This is what I use anyway. I use a 3/4 inch pinstripe, okay? And I run it from the top to the bottom of the door. And by the way, don't just assume that they're going to stop at the crown. They could go clear up to the door, or they could go clear down almost to the bottom. Sometimes that'll happen. So you start from top to bottom of the door, run your pinstripe through the area that just popped out. And what are we looking for? Pinches. Yeah. Curves are fine. If it curves and pinches, that is not fine. Or if it's straight and it pinches, that is not fine. Even if you see a small little pinch, guys, small little pinch would look a lot bigger if it were vertical, because remember, we are losing some of our visual information. So we run it from top to bottom. Any pinches you see, guys, you get those out. You know, you just asked how do you get those down? How do you knock them down? My favorite way is with this is called a master tool. You get a slapper, keep it very highly polished, very, very fast, very fast. But they do have a little bit of a learning curve. You can get carried away with these things and make some damage. But what I love about these things, it moves and shocks metal at the same time. Very, very fast, and actually very clean once you get the hang of it. But what I would recommend you guys do for now is, and this is going to be one of those hugely expensive tools, guys. You're going to have to save at least a week's pay to get this. Go to Home Depot. Get yourself one of their thick stir sticks, not the thin ones, the nice thick stir stick. Okay? And sight down it this way. They can be curved this way, but it has to be flat that way. So a nice flat stir stick. You get them for free. Put one layer of Gorilla Tape on it. Okay? And how we use these is you put it right on a little pressure trap and hammer them out. Now this is a lot more. This will not move and shock metal the way that one will, but it's a lot harder to screw up with this thing. So when you get really good with this, get a metal slapper and finish it. You'll probably won't go back. I mean, I still use this thing a lot of times. I'll use it sometimes on a very soft crown. Helps to move everything better and just, you know, with fewer marks in it. So just do that on all your pressure traps. Wash them right out. Okay, that's one way.
Now, with that, do you do the same thing, or do you actually hit it with the mat?
I hit it. Well, both. I'll hit it, I'll slap it, and I will hit it. You got to abuse it. Let it know who's boss.
And could we potentially use that on that bodyline dents that we have done? Would that work there too?
Hammer's better. The polished hammer is way better at that. Okay. Yeah. that $20 jeweler's hammer works just as good as super expensive blending hammers.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. All right. So knock any horizontal pressure traps out. After you get those out, what I want you guys to do, at least for your first few dozen, is I want you to stop at that point and I want you to get back on your dent. And you'll notice that your vertical lows that were there have softened up. Or maybe some of them have even gone away, and you go, well, how could taking horizontal make verticals go away? That's because, guys, you're helping to put that panel back into compression and actually in a little bit of tension also doing this. If you do this out of sequence, this will not happen. This will not happen, okay? So get your horizontals knocked down, your verticals, actually, your vertical lows are not as pronounced now, okay? And a lot of people will say, they just can't believe that something that, I mean, once they know how to look for them, they'll go, oh, but that's so soft. That can't possibly make a difference. You'll see it yourself. You'll see it yourself. And if you leave those in there, guys, what do you think is happening? You don't see them, right? You leave them in there and you try to get those little lows out, and it's just, why am I having to push so hard on these soft little lows that should be coming up? You let pressure, you let springs in your panel. That's what pressure traps are, okay? So, in fact, now that you know what to look for, watch some of those videos. You'll see this mistake made over and over and over again. At least if they have like a good natural reflection, you'll be able to see the pressure traps. And God doesn't know any better, so he just keeps pushing up those lows. Okay, so we got our horizontals out. What do we do next? Now we're going to look for 45-degree pressure traps, and those are pressure traps going to be running at a 45-degree angle to where our dent used to be. Okay. Now you can use your pinstripe board again if you want. Fog, whatever you want. Most people starting out, I think, like a pinstripe better. And you guys noticed on your rails yesterday, when you used a pinstripe in combination with the fog, made a huge difference, didn't it? I mean, now if you have your finishing board up, not so much. But you know, when you're just dialing everything in, that pinstripe will show you every nitpicking thing you've missed. So. And you saw yourselves when you were hitting those pressure traps, those slight little pinches that you didn't think were any big deal. What happened to your lows? It's like, wow, I don't have to glue pull again. That's right. You know. So what we do for the 45s is we get our board back here, and run our pinstripe through, and these will hide as much as 6 inches away from your dent. And they also love hiding right next to any lows that you have. So pay particular attention to any lows. Look right at the edge of the low. You'll probably see these. So any pinches from here, then go here from 45 degrees, okay? Then you turn around, look at them from here, and then from there, always at a 45-degree angle, about 6 inches away from the dent. And if you see any, knock them out, and you almost certainly will. Okay. And obviously, if you have your tension on a panel, this is a lot faster. You'll just barely have to kiss them. They're going to pop right out. So you leave your tension on the panel, you would do this same thing. But we're saying right now, what if you can't put tension on it? Okay, so you get all your 45 degrees out. You look at your lows, definitely softened up. Good. Now, we're going to go ahead and put our board straight up and down, and we're going to get any vertical pressure traps out. And they, again, can be 6 inches away from a dent or more, and they love hiding next to the soft little low that's left in your dent. Put your board back, take those out, your lows will soften up even more. Now, at this point, you can take your tension off your panel. It's not going to really help you that much anymore. If you don't have any tension on, then don't have to worry about that. You get in there, and at this point now, we can finally go ahead and do something about our impact point. Now, if you have any bad horizontal lows, you'll want to get those out before that, but you know, we're going to address our impact point. And if it's not stretched, and this one clearly is not stretched, just a matter of, you know, soft tipping it up, glue pulling it if you want to, getting back there, make a few pushes, you know, you're close to being done. And at that point, it's just kind of a matter of what did you promise the customer. You know, if you promised them 95%, and like we said, most people, that's really all they want, you know, put the board about 4 feet back, make it look good, you're ready to go. 98%, you'll have to have it about another 3 feet back. And remember to make those panels up that we talked about. That's really important. You can't just tell a customer 95, 98. He won't know what you're talking about. You got to give him something visual to look at. Okay, now what if this impact was caused by some stretched metal? You know, hammer, whatever, put a nice quarter-size amount of stretched metal there. You still do everything basically the way you did. Everything pops out, your pressure traps. Now you're going to go for that stretched metal. And guys, that stretched metal, if it's bad enough, you could spend as much or more time on that as you did in the entire dent up to this point. It just depends on how badly it's stretched. That's why we say it is a limiting factor as far as maximum amount of money you're going to make on dents. Okay, so at that point, you had any stretched metal, get your heat on there if needed, get that metal nice and shrunk up, take some time, and I say that'll probably be the weak point of the panel, you know, the weak point of your repair. That'll show a little bit. So, you know, just whatever you promise the customer, whatever percentage, get her done. What happens when we introduce a body line into it? Okay, so right before we just talked about a nice curved panel. Now what about when we have a body line thrown in? Well, there's only two possibilities. It either got hit on the body line or above or below it, right? Hit it or missed it. Only two possibilities, okay? Let's talk about what happens when it hits the body line directly first, okay? So boom, you're right on the body line, you got that going on. What do you do different? Not a whole lot. People think, well, I want to get that body line up first. No, you don't. Energy is here. Yeah, but the body line's in. I know that. Well, doesn't that trap some energy? Some, but there's much more in your crowns. So we're going to basically, guys, do exactly what we did before. If you can put tension on, so much the better, okay? Let's say you can't. We're still going to wash our crowns into the dent, okay? The only thing I might do a little bit differently is get that, remember that when I told you I put in boiling water to that tab, and I put it on the body line, I might lightly put some pressure on the body line only to help the crown move past the body line, only, or move into it, I should say. Well, I might put a little bit of pressure on that, but my main focus, guys, is going to be moving those crowns into that body line since that's where it got hit. Still my main focus. Okay, so I move that energy into the body line. So we've washed everything in the body line, guys. Body line pops out, or at least most of it. Now what you're going to see, guys, if it's just like a fist or something soft, go ahead and pick your body line up. But on these guys, almost always what you're going to get is a body line hinge. 100%, almost 100% of the time. And a lot of times that's what guys leave in there. They're picking that body line like crazy. Like, man, I got everything out. Why isn't that body line moving? They left a hinge in there. So remember the rule, the distance of the diameter of the body line, that distance out, sharpen the body line into it. Okay, pick up that body line into it. Comes right out, generally speaking. Okay, if you have a bad crease across it, you got to deal with that crease like we talked about.
So would you be going for that body line after the stretched metal that's in the middle? If there was
now if the body line was stretched, so like say a hammer hit right on the body, that could be difficult. Stretched metal on a body line is heat for one thing, lots and lots of heat, and just so you can't really shrink metal up on there because you'll crack it. I mean, you'll pickle up a body line big time. So you still have to soft tip the majority of it up. I mean, you can do a little bit of shrinking around the body line and on it. Now, aluminum, don't you dare. You can actually crack an aluminum body line if you're not careful. I know a few techs that have done it, and it's a sick feeling to be working on F-150 and all of a sudden, the body line cracked, and they're sweating. It can happen. But yeah, that's a different story. So yeah, if it's stretched metal on the body line, again, that could be a limiting factor. How badly is it straight? Was it a basketball hoop that fell right across it and it just crushed? You want to get involved in that? Could you do it? If I were to do that, it would be with profile punches. I'll tell you that right now. I wouldn't even try doing that with conventional tool. That's for me, that's absolutely profile punch. Or hammer and dolly if I could get something in back of there, polished hammer and dolly. Okay, so if it's got a body line hinge, and it certainly almost always will, pick up the body line hinge into it, and then just do just like you did with your pressure traps. Horizontals, 45s, and then verticals. Okay? Again, this is all just basic, guys. These are the extreme basics here. Okay. Now, what if it got hit above or below the body line? Well, two things will happen. If it gets hit below the body line or above, either the energy was enough to make it past the body line or it didn't make it past it. Okay? So let's say it got hit, energy traveled up, but it couldn't quite make it past the body line and it stopped, or it looks like it stopped. Okay? You go, oh, I just have a little dent there I got to worry about. If it's a good sized dent that's relatively close to the body line, you need to look closer. Two things. First of all, look for what we call a thumbnail crown. It's sometimes right above the body line, just as soft as a thumbnail. Oh, that's no big deal. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. You'll see these especially on license plate pockets, on SUV lift gates and stuff like that all the time. Little thumbnail crown. If you see a thumbnail crown, tap it down first. And you can bet if you got a thumbnail crown, you got a body line hinge also, 100% of the time. If it got locked into the body line, and what I always do, first thing I always do is I sight down it, and you can almost see a soft little low in that body line. And some people, oh, that's no big deal. Guys, yeah, it's pressure's trapped in there. You need to release it, okay? If you don't, you're gonna have a much harder time getting that dent up. Okay, so now what happens, guys, if you get hard enough to where the energy makes it past the body line and still forms a crown. So your impact point's down there, energy went right past the body line, made a crown, drug the body line in. Okay, I suspect that's what happened here. I think you got hit just underneath it. Now when that happens, fellas, what do we do differently? Well, it's kind of the same thing. We still wash our crowns in. If you have to do the panel arcing, if the crown's made it past there, you might want to do that right after you do this. Sometimes I'll even re-arc the panel before I'll do anything with the crown. It just kind of depends, but usually crowns first, okay? We wash our crown. So it got hit here, made it past the body line. I'm still washing my crowns with my tab, of course, or tension if I can. Usually, if it got hit below body line, I will almost always put a tab on the body line and put maybe 100 pounds on it, not much. So I'd have one strap here, one strap on my bottom crown, and a strap coming, so there'd be 3 tabs total, and 3 straps pulling on it. 100 pounds only on that body line. And again, it's just to help that metal go past the body line. That's all I'm interested in. We direct that energy back past the body line, and again, I'll put just enough to help that body line, just enough to kind of help that energy, that metal move past the body line. When that happens, again, most of it pops out, and from that point, we would treat it pretty much like we did when it got hit right on the body line, because you do everything in the same sequence that we just talked about. And pressure taps, usually going to be a little bit worse on these, because when the energy was enough to make it past the body line and still form a crown, it probably went to the top and bounced a little bit. Sometimes you'll see 2 or 3 crowns layered on top of each other. When that happens, usually, not always, but usually I'll start with the one closest to the dent and work it back. It just all depends. I mean, a lot of people say, small dents are just like big dents. Big dents are just a bigger version of a small dent. That you can see that's total BS. There's no way that's true. But you have lots of people that insist that it is. It definitely is not. Okay. That. Now, we talked about finishing the dent, guys. Like I said, about 4 feet back is usually good enough for 95, another 3 feet back for 97. You say, well, I want to get my large dents 100%. 100%. No, you don't. Yeah, I've lost track of how many large dents I've done. I have never yet done a good size large dent to a true 100%. That means head 20 feet back, picket stripe, a picket fence for reflection, looking back and forth, not a glimmer, nothing, not a glimmer. It's just not possible to get a true 100%. I've gotten plenty of 99s. That last 1 or half of a percent, I suppose if you stayed at it long enough and gathered up enough metal, you could. The problem with that becomes, here, in fact, let's go over here, I'll show you. Guys, you asked, about a true 100% repair. What keeps us from getting a true 100% repair? Okay, if we damage a panel, okay, we bring it back up. Remember we talked about when it gets hit, what happens? Slight amount of compression, slight amount of tension from the crowns blowing out. You can never, guys, get that panel back into a true, now with tension, it greatly helps things out, yes, but you can't, it's a very long, involved explanation, but to make it very simple, you still have a little bit of compression in that panel. And what happens is I will try to move this thing, I'm going to pretend it's the panel, I'm going to try to move it in just as little as I can. Well, that was too much. That's about as little as I can do. Okay, that little bit of, look what happens. See how the whole panel, no matter where I push, a wave comes in someplace else. That's what you're dealing with. You have just a slight amount of metal. In fact, the proper term for it is metal that's in a compressive state. When it happens like that, it should be in tension, but it's still very, very slightly compressed. Even though you can measure from the back, I mean, get a super accurate, calipers or whatever, no difference between that door and the other door. I mean, it's exactly, and the door didn't shorten at all. It's just that grain structure, that metal wants to be in tension, and it's forever altered. You cannot put it back. As when we repair, we can get close, but we can't get it back into 100% tension state. And of course, the more compression you have, the worse it's going to be to get it finished. That's why tension will always get you to the 98, 99% very quickly. Without tension, it's going to take you longer. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, you get to see you pull this thing out.
Start to finish. This is his job.
That's not fair.
BS. You're going to be doing this, and we're going to be filming it too. We're going to be filming everything you do to it. Lucky you. If you're not doing a minimum of $300 an hour in large dent repair, there's something drastically wrong. Now, if you're in a rural area, totally different. If you're where there's lots of pickup trucks, you got a tough road to hoe no matter what you do. So when guys call from rural areas, I always kind of quiz them. Are you sure you know your market area? Because people don't care about their vehicles. You're going to have to, if you're in the rural areas, you have to go to some big city to do it. But you're not going to do $300 in a large dent repair in a rural area. I'll tell you that right now. But in any decent city with a fair amount of decent cars, especially European cars, 300 minimum. I mean, when I can use tension, I typically do 500. Not yet, because tension just does so much. Well, I can't anymore with my, I'm an old man. But the wrists and the joints and the eyes are not what they used to be. Now, like I said, if you guys decide that you want to do the really massively hit stuff, again, it isn't worth it. There's a point to where the body shop is going to put on a new door and going to paint it, and the biggest thing is the cost savings there. All we can say then is, well, we're going to keep your original factory paint, which is cool, but stay within the parameters I showed you. That's where the money is to be made. I just don't see any reason to go beyond it. I mean, you can do it for ego reasons, or say if it's a buddy, yeah, sure. But that crown versus another 10 degrees, let's say it's 90 degree, let's say it was an 80 degree crown, a little bit sharper. That could easily take twice as much time to get this to a finished product of 98%. Why? Once you get past the 90 degree point, now you're not going to find this in any book, I've just noticed it over the years. After 90, there's something about 90 degree angle. Once you start sharpening up every 10 degrees, now you double the force. Remember we talked about every 20 degrees getting to 90? Once you go past 90 into the 60 degree range, every 10 degrees now doubles the force. So a 60 degree crown may not seem like, that doesn't look like too much. Usually the paint's blown off of it anyway. You're going to have a much harder time getting it to anything like 98%, because there's just too much energy that's going to be trapped in that thing. Again, there are exceptions to that. There are exceptions to every rule, but we're talking about generally. All we're doing here, guys, this is extremely the basics. This is the basics. There's not a rule in PDR that there aren't exceptions to. Remember the old last in, first out, right? You guys have heard that. The last damage in, that's the first damage you want to take out. Well, where most people screw up in is thinking, well, okay, the first damage was that, so the impact point's first, and the second, the last would be the crowns, because the crowns are furthest from the dent. No, that is not the last damage. There's two other types of damage that can occur. First one is that one. Remember we talked about that? Even if this door didn't get shrunk up, a little bit of tension or compression in what should be in tension is massively going to screw you up if you don't know how to deal with it. Okay, and the other force that could be, you might have to re-arc that panel. So that could end up being the very last. So the last force is either this, or in extreme cases, having to re-arc the panel. Okay, any questions? Comments, smart remarks, nothing? Come on, you guys are metal, man. Come on. Nothing at a body shop you've seen that...
I've been doing it wrong.
You've been doing it wrong?
Yeah.
Everybody says that.
I've been doing it wrong.
Yeah. Well, you won't anymore. And like I said, guys, you do want to start off slow. I would say at the maximum grapefruit size. Start off with that for a larger dent. Go out to saucer cup, dinner plate, do some, stay away from body lines for a little bit, and then fenders are probably going to be what will give you the most issue. If you end up doing a lot of fenders, and I don't know why, but in 2003, 2004, it seemed like every third large dent I did was fenders. But if you get really good with a hammer and dolly, and you probably already are fairly decent, that'll save you Oh, it's so, hammers and dollies are so fast because you've got beautiful access in there. You can iron things on beautifully. And if you do that, a quick tip, save your styrofoam blocks. What I used to do is cut the styrofoam blocks to where they would fit up into the apron and leave just enough room for my hand and my dolly to get in there. And I would rest my wrist against that styrofoam. And you know, the whole secret to hammer and dolly, guys, is 80 to 90% force dolly, 10 to 20 hand. The hand's basically kissing. The dolly's doing the work. And once you learn to roll crowns into, oh man, the fenders come out very quickly. But it'll take a while. You would start off on that very small also. So maybe pick a couple fender dents. Just use a hammer and dolly only on it, just to practice, and you'll get the hang of it.